An extraordinary exclusive interview from inside Egypt's presidential palace. There, President Hosni Mubarak, the strong man whose 30-year grip on power is loosening, waits and watches. Outside those fortified walls, chaos, another day of bloody clashes. What is he thinking? And when will he step down? Krstina Amampour brings us the first interview with Hosni Mubarak since the protests began. Krstina?
Terry, good evening. It has been the most extraordinary 24 hours. Right now, we're broadcasting to you from inside our hotel room rather than looking over the Nile, looking over the protests as we have been doing. And that is because the targeting of journalists has gotten so bad over the last 24 hours that systematically either vigilantes or whoever, mobs, have been coming into hotels, snatching the satellite and broadcast equipment and basically shutting down the journalists, any journalists who they could find. And so we've had to move inside to try to keep broadcasting and tell you the story. The story this day was the clashes. Some of them still continue. The protesters, anti-Mubarak, remain in control of Tahrir Square, Liberation Square, and we got an exclusive interview with the Vice President of Egypt. And as we went to the presidential palace, we got mobbed in these ad hoc checkpoints where huge groups, hundreds of pro-Mubarak supporters suddenly surrounded our cars, separated us, banged on the doors, and really made a very tense situation. We were very fortunate that after long talking and trying to get out of there, we managed to, and we headed to the presidential palace. And there, as we were setting up for our interview, I wondered whether President Mubarak was there. And I asked, could I see him? I knew him. I'd interviewed him before. I'd been to that palace before. And do you know what? They took me to see him. And there we chatted, and we'll have that story in a moment. But our day began with Liberation Square.
After a day and night of pitched battles that broke up only as the sun rose, we went back to Tahrir Square this morning.
Inside the barricades, again the protesters are lining up their own civil defense here, prepared for what might happen this afternoon.
We were shooting on a cell phone-sized camera because pro-Mubarak mobs had been attacking journalists. Though the gunfire had stopped, the atmosphere in the square was tense. All over the square, we saw the weary and the wounded.
One of the stones came here just above my eyebrows.
Their foreheads, noses, faces bandaged and bloody. After a battle that lasted the day yesterday and culminated overnight, when gangs of pro-government mobs had opened fire with automatic weapons on the anti-government demonstrators there. By morning, they remained in control of Liberation Square. Their resolve only stiffened, and they were manning new barricades. Reinforcements were pouring in. People came with new supplies, bottled water and bread, blankets, digging in for the long haul.
Well, this is fruit juice, and this is cotton and sutures and surgical gloves.
Around the barricade there were piles of rocks from last night to use as weapons if they were attacked again. Exhausted from last night's battle, many were sleeping in the grass, resting for another day on the front lines. They say they won't leave until Mubarak does. In an extraordinary move today, the Prime Minister apologized for the violence of yesterday and promised an investigation. And already there have been reports of a few small clashes at one end of the square. As we left the square, we heard that our request for an interview with Vice President Omar Suleiman had been granted. As we headed out, we were apprehensive. Just yesterday, we had an unsettling experience on a bridge leading into the square, when we were surrounded by a group of Mubarak supporters and had to make a quick getaway in our car. The group attacked our vehicle and shattered the windshield. And now, as we drove to the palace, something even more unsettling happened.
We were stopped by a mob that grew after a checkpoint, a sort of a self-declared checkpoint on one of the roads in a neighborhood. And all our cars were surrounded by angry people. And it took all the powers of diplomacy that we had to stay cool, to stay calm, and to talk our way out of it. Also, some military came up to us, and once we told them that we had an appointment with the vice president, because that's who we thought we were going to see when we started this day, we slowly were able to get ourselves out of there.
We reached the palace, which is surrounded at this point by tanks, under military escort. And as our cameramen were setting up for our exclusive interview with Vice President Omar Suleiman, I asked if I could see President Mubarak. Within minutes, I was whisked into a reception room to see him.
When I walked in, I asked him how he was. He said, I feel strong. He said, I am not the kind of person to run. And he said, I will die on Egyptian soil. When I asked him about whether he would step down now, he said to me, you know, Christiane, I've been in public service for 62 years, and now I'm fed up and I want to retire. But if I resign now, he said, there will be chaos, and I'm afraid the Muslim Brotherhood will take over. I asked him whether he felt betrayed. He sort of did the universal hand movement, but he did say that he thought President Obama, quote, was a very good man. He said that he had not been asked to step down, but he also said that he had told President Obama, quote, that you don't understand the Egyptian culture and you don't understand what would happen if I resigned today. He did say, once he had made that statement, once he had heard the demands of the people, as he told me, that they were legitimate demands, he had made the decision to step aside, and he said he felt relief after that. I did say, where would he go once he stepped down? And he said, Egypt, this is my home. He said he didn't care what people were saying about him right now. He said that he cared only about his country, about Egypt, and that when the time comes, he would die in Egypt. I've visited that palace many times. I've interviewed President Mubarak in much less tense times. Usually the halls are crowded. There are lots of acolytes and officials in the halls, walking, bringing tea, bringing coffee. This time there was a sense that everybody was in their offices. We walked down an empty hall that was not populated, and yet people were in their offices looking out just by their faces. You could see they were questioning and wondering and looking at us. And again, a sense of resignation tinged by a great deal of tension and edginess. And I got the sense today, though, that there was an edge, obviously, to what's going on. There was and there is a tension, but also a sense of resignation that whatever happens, happens, and whatever their fate may be, so be it. Dawn is about to break on Friday now, and there are Friday prayers. And after that, protesters have called on people to come out. They believe that this is going to be the biggest demonstration against President Mubarak yet, and they hope this day will be a game changer. For their part, President Mubarak and his people are just hoping that what they've given already is enough, and the protesters go home. Terry?
It's an extraordinary moment, Christiane, and an extraordinary interview there. This regime under tremendous pressure, this man, this leader of the country, almost absolute ruler for 30 years under such pressure. What was it like inside the presidential palace? What's that inner circle feel like?
Well, you could sense the tension. You could sense a sort of end of regime feeling, a fin de regime, really. And we went inside, and this was a palace I had been in full. There were press conferences, there were interviews, there were officials running around over the years, and everything was geared towards the president. All sorts of activity going on. But on this evening, it was practically deserted, except for the guards, obviously, except for the last remaining faithful there, or that's what it seemed. And as we walked down the corridors, it was really echoey, it was really empty. And I looked left and right into offices that were open, and I saw people tense, looking at me. Brief glimpses of these people who looked fearful and who really wondered what their fate was going to be, Terry.
And these kinds of situations, Christiane, as you know, end often in one of two ways, either with the leader on a jet heading for Saudi Arabia or somewhere, or the leader killed somehow, as happened in Romania. It sounds as if Hosni Mubarak is determined not to leave Egypt. He wants to die there, it sounds like.
You know, Terry, that's absolutely right. And I asked him again, and this is a very proud man who truly believes that he has done great things for this country and steered it through some very, very difficult times. And in fact, even some of the protesters on the square told me that, yes, they want him to go now, but they respect his history. In fact, that's exactly what they wrote on placards. They respect his history, but he must go. And he has said that when he steps down, he will not flee. He said that's not in his nature. He's not going to escape, he told me. He's going to stay and die in Egypt.
A proud man, as you say.